Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is the owner of Always Growing Nutrition with an emphasis on sports nutrition and functionality. Today's guest is Deidre Bloomquist. Deidre, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. So Deidre, we're just going to jump right into things. I've got a little kind of a warm-up, conversational warm-up for us today. I've got 4 questions. And the first question that I have for you is, how do you start your day? Do you have a specific morning routine or morning ritual that you like to stick to on most mornings?
I think for me, I don't have a ritual per se. It definitely includes having a cup of coffee first thing.
Cool.
But I also have 3 dogs, so they typically tend to dictate my morning routine.
I'm sure, for sure.
Always letting them out, feeding them. We have a lab. He's always hungry.
Cool.
So, yeah, just feeding them and then sitting down and having a cup of coffee and usually watching a little bit of the news.
Okay, cool. The second question that I have for you, Deidre, is do you have a favorite book or book that you like to gift often? And if there's more than one, please feel free to share.
Okay. The one that I like to gift to clients a lot is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I focus a lot of my work around building habits and working with groups of people on how to change the habits in their life and how to do that effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a book that I like to give people so that they can really dive in deep and use the tools that he explains. It's definitely something that I've used a lot in seminars that I do to talk to different groups of people. So it's one of my favorite books to really help people understand why they think the way they do and why they do the things they do, even if they think it's really ingrained in them, and how to make changes. Cool.
All right. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, or maybe just a word that's been impactful in your life at some point? Maybe it's like this current season you're in, or maybe it's a past season. So favorite quote, mantra, or word?
I think my favorite mantra has become my business name, which is Always Growing.
Cool.
And that, for a long time, I really struggled with what my business name should be and went back and forth between a lot of names. And I always came back to those 2 words because I feel like myself as a person, I'm always trying to learn more and do better. And so that's really what I wanted to put as kind of the center of my business and how I was focusing around what my clients were doing. And that's kind of how I approach people, is no matter where they're at, they can do a little bit of growing. So growing is kind of my core theme.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's something, just for human beings, it's important for us to remember kind of that saying that I hear a lot of people saying is either you're always growing or you're growing or you're dying, basically. You know what I mean? There's not really anything in between that. So I really appreciate that, and I love that. And I think that's something too, in regards to like nutrition, fitness, like there's always new research that's being presented. There's always, new science. So I think it's important for those of us that are kind of in that nutrition, health, fitness space to always be growing, always being open to learning and things like that. So I really appreciate that and like that. So the last question is a part of the conversational warm-up. Deidre, do you have a favorite or most listened to podcast?
Right now, I am fairly obsessed with this podcast that is called Terrible. Thanks for asking.
Okay, cool.
And a lot of it is really sad, so I would warn people of that before they start listening to that before something important. But the host is a really great storyteller, and they talk to people who have gone through a lot of tragedies or adversity, and the way that it's done is really tragic, but also kind of shows the beauty in like sadness and dealing with those types of adversity.
Cool.
So there's some really tough topics in there, but it's also a really deep and like meaningful podcast. So have really kind of hooked on that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I don't think I've ever heard of that one. Is it like on NPR or is it just on all the platforms?
It's on all the platforms.
Okay.
I listen to it on Spotify.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Okay, so we're gonna dive in a little bit, Deidre, to kind of like your backstory. So if you don't mind sharing with myself and the listeners, where did you grow up? Kind of like, were you involved in like extracurricular activities, sports, music, things like that in those younger years, and then we'll kind of move on from there.
Okay. So I grew up in Greeley, Colorado.
Okay.
I'm a Colorado native.
Yep.
And when I was a kid, I played a lot of sports, but no sport in a really dedicated fashion.
Okay, yeah.
So I ran track, I did a lot of track and field stuff, I played volleyball, I played basketball at one point. In high school, I played volleyball on the varsity team, mostly because I was one of the taller girls.
Okay, well, hey, whatever works,
so
right?
But beyond that, I wasn't really terribly active. I never lifted weights or did anything like that as a kid. And then going into college, I was definitely more academically focused. So I didn't do a lot of exercise. I think I went to my college gym maybe once or twice.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't really get involved with fitness until after college.
Okay.
And then after college, I started going to yoga classes. And which is kind of silly. The reason I liked going to yoga classes is because I didn't have to wear shoes.
Okay,
I wanted to be able to exercise without shoes.
That's cool. I like that.
So I started doing yoga classes and fell in love with it. And I liked teaching other people. So I, pretty soon after starting yoga, got involved with yoga teacher training. And the style of yoga that I did was Sculpt.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I'm not.
So yoga Sculpt is more geared towards having smaller weights. And so it's a lot of strength training in a yoga flow.
I like that.
So I got really involved in that and was becoming an instructor. And one of my mentors at the time for yoga instruction, I was telling her I was really frustrated because I couldn't do push-ups as a yoga instructor. And she was like, you should come with me to my gym and I'll help you with your push-ups. So I went to her gym with her, and it turned out it was a CrossFit gym.
Okay.
So I started doing CrossFit and loved that as well. So that's kind of how I started really getting into the fitness piece of everything.
Right. Okay, so I want to take just a couple steps back. So in regards to kind of like your childhood and stuff, you mentioned kind of like trying all kinds of different sports, but not maybe really finding the one that you were really passionate about or really good at. Was there anything else in regards to kind of like extracurricular activities or, maybe things outside of school that you really enjoyed? Was it maybe like reading, writing? Was there anything that we can maybe take away from your childhood that you really enjoyed, or maybe was that outlet for you outside of the athletics?
Totally. I loved writing when I was a kid.
There we go.
And that definitely came through later. I loved writing. I loved arts. I was very into music and the creative piece of that. And so that's definitely transferred into my adult life.
Cool.
But yeah, I kind of just dabbled in it. And it was always one of those things that I never thought was going to be a career.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanna camp out on the writing thing because I call myself a writer. It's an amazing tool for me in regards to like expression and just getting my inner stuff out. So like, how did you kind of like did you kind of pick up writing just through school, because that's like what we have to do? Like we have to learn to tie our shoes, we have to learn how to read and write. Did you kind of like pick that up from school, or did you have like maybe a parent or a sibling that was really into writing and kind of passed that on to you? How did you kind of come up or how did you kind of stumble upon writing or get into it? And then what does writing specifically do for you? Like, is it kind of like it is for me, just kind of like a form of expression? What does it kind of mean to you outside of like, just like the actual, I'm just writing a paper for school or something like that?
Totally. I got into it through school.
Okay.
I remember there was an assignment in one of my classes where we had to use vocabulary words and put them into poetry.
Okay.
And you had to use one vocabulary word to theme an entire poem. And so I did that, and I just remembered this, oddly enough. I wrote this poem, and this was back when AOL was the thing.
Yep.
And so I found this website that was, it was a poetry website, but they published poetry books.
Okay.
And I was 12, maybe?
Yeah.
12, 13, and decided I was going to submit one of these poems to this
Cool.
poetry website.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up getting selected and published, which
Dang.
was bizarre at the time. But I really just kind of got into it from that perspective, and then I think the whole time I was going through school, even through college, if I would do poetry or creative writing, it was more based out of it being a school project. Because going through school, I ended up going to school to be a journalism major.
Okay, cool.
So it became what I did in a way to tell a story more than anything with people. But for a long time, it was just something that I was doing because it was a school project. It was write this paper, has to be informational, things like that. But it kind of became a way to tell a story. So when I was a writer, I did a lot more interviews where I would feature somebody in particular and sit down and have a conversation and tell a story about them. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I get out of writing is relaying information to somebody in a way that is meaningful for them, or can be meaningful for anybody reading it. And kind of telling that story. And now I kind of see it as a way that I can relate to other people, and it's really, I think, the best way for me to explain something that's a little bit more in depth. Even if it's more of conversational writing in terms of explaining to somebody what's going on in their body. Explaining it in a way that I can break it down and make it very effective and easy for them to read and understand so they have that information.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing that. So you mentioned that you went to college and you studied journalism, correct? And so is that what you ended up getting your degree in, or?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So what was, let's just touch a little bit before we move on and get into kind of the yoga and the CrossFit a little bit more depth, and then the nutrition aspect of things. What were the college years like for you? You mentioned you really didn't get into any type of fitness even during college. So, was college a great experience for you? Was it just kind of like, hey, I'm just there, got to get my degree and move on? What did those 4 years look like for you, Deidre?
So I would say college, I was definitely very academically based, but college for me wasn't really like the traditional college experience in terms of like going and partying and having a good time. I went to the University of Denver. I got my journalism degree, and so I think college for me was a lot about finding what I really wanted to do. Because when I started college, I didn't start with the idea of going for journalism. Initially, I wanted to go to medical school, and so I started as a biology major, and I love the science of everything in the human body, but it felt very regurgitated to me, especially since I had focused on so much science in high school and being academic and like doing AP classes and all that stuff. When I got to college, it just felt like the same material. And it wasn't keeping my brain active. So I kind of had this realization that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life and be focusing on things in that way, or at least in that format, as being a doctor and having to memorize things and just having it be a list of facts in my head. So I started getting involved with writing because that was the other thing that I was really interested in at the time. And I wanted to be able to use my school smarts in a way that was still able to like tap into the creative part of my brain. So I really got interested in writing. I did really well with it. I really enjoyed a lot of different writing formats in terms of I was a writer for the school newspaper, I was an editor for the newspaper, and that's kind of where I found that I really liked teaching other people. Because I mentored younger writers on how to format their pieces, doing assignments for them, and then reviewing it, and that whole process.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start talking about kind of your fitness journey. You already kind of mentioned you got into like yoga sculpt, and then you got into CrossFit, which that's quite the contrast going from like yoga, even though it was like kind of like the yoga sculpt and some lighter weights, which I didn't even know that type of yoga existed. I think that's amazing because resistance training is very, very important. But anyways, yoga to CrossFit, like that's like very, very extreme. It doesn't get much more extreme than that. So like let's just talk a little bit about that journey. So once you kind of stepped into yoga, what and it doesn't sound like, obviously you played sports when you were younger and stuff, right? But like the whole fitness thing, especially during college, you said it just wasn't there for you. You were more academically focused, which is what college should be all about. So what was it like stepping into yoga and then kind of stepping into the fitness community, so to speak?
So I definitely, up until that point, never considered myself an athlete. Was not strong, not coordinated. Balance was not my thing. And so going into yoga was really more coming out of looking for health for me.
Okay, cool.
I never went into yoga or any type of fitness in terms of I want to do this to be fit or to lose weight or to change my body anyway. It was more that I just wanted to be healthy. And so I think a lot of it for me was kind of the movement meditation piece of yoga, and just a way to calm down my brain and do something physically with my body. So I started getting into that, and that was kind of when everything started shifting and thinking about what I was eating, and it was very different back then.
Yeah, of course.
But just thinking about what I was eating and kind of shifting away from like the traditional college diet of like ramen and noodles all the time. But it was definitely like that first step for me. And it was definitely something that was very foreign to me. A huge learning curve in terms of I had the background knowledge of human anatomy and physiology and knowing like muscles and things like that. So I had that edge on that. But at the same time, I didn't know how to really utilize it.
Right. So was there a little bit of like, even though, I mean, you know, most people probably aren't going to think of like yoga as intimidating, but if you've never really had any type of fitness experience and things like that, it's any aspect of like we all want to fit in, right? We all want to be liked. We don't like rejection, things like that. We always have that struggle within us, even the people that say they don't. But anytime we're stepping into something kind of like new, even though if we have like some sort of knowledge base, which is helpful, but if we've never really done it, that can be kind of intimidating, you know, it can be hard. So when you first kind of like started stepping into yoga, was there some intimidation, some fear and anxiety that you kind of had to break through and overcome to kind of like really enjoy that movement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in any group setting, I think anybody could say that when you go in and you see other people doing the same thing, there's definitely an aspect of comparison in terms of watching other people move, and they can do this and I can't quite do that, or I don't have the strength or the balance to do things. So there was definitely a big challenge there and a growth piece for me in terms of looking at what other people could do and then learning how to not take it personally and kind of trust the process and just keep showing up. Even though I wasn't really good at it to begin with.
Yeah, okay, cool. So CrossFit. So let's talk about how you kind of mentioned how I think it was a friend that kind of brought you into CrossFit to teach you, to help teach you and help instruct you in regards to getting push-ups. So what was kind of like that contrast from going from yoga sculpt to CrossFit? Like what was that kind of initial experience like? Again, was it very intimidating for you? What were kind of some of those feelings and emotions as you started to step from yoga into CrossFit?
Yeah, it was very different.
Of course, CrossFit's like intimidating for me, so.
It was definitely very different. I mean, think about going from a yoga class where you have maybe maximum like a 10-pound dumbbell.
Right.
And my first CrossFit workout was Elizabeth, which was ring dips and squat cleans.
Wow.
So very different.
Very, yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that I remember is just thinking like everyone is so strong. And there's definitely a big community aspect, which makes it a little bit easier, but it's like I'd never done a ring dip. I think a ring dip existed before that sort of thing. So definitely a lot of nervousness there, but I think it just opened up the door to me that there's still so much more to learn.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so first of all, did your friend help you start getting your push-ups? And then second of all, was it kind of like an immediate thing that you really fell in love with CrossFit? Because it seems like from my experience and just being in the fitness community for a long time, people either love CrossFit or they don't love it. Either they're like all in or they're not into CrossFit at all. You know what I mean? So did you start drinking the CrossFit Kool-Aid right away? After you share about your push-ups, did you start drinking the CrossFit Kool-Aid? And did that kind of like, because that's something I respect about CrossFit is like they've really helped grow like Olympic weightlifting, right? They've really helped grow like powerlifting. They've really put a magnifying glass on strong women, strength, and it's just like from I'm only 32, but when I was powerlifting when I was like a tween and a teenager, like you go to a powerlifting competition, there's like 3 or 4 ladies and they were older and pretty pretty hardcore. I've done some powerlifting since, and it's like it's unbelievable. I mean, young girls, very attractive, and it's just like, whoa, like how did this happen? And I know a lot of that is through CrossFit. So push-ups first, and then did you start drinking the CrossFit Kool-Aid?
So yes, I definitely got my push-ups.
Okay, cool.
And then even once that started happening, I just realized there were so many more things that I sucked at.
For sure, yeah.
So then there were new goals, of course. And I think that's kind of what really helped me drink the Kool-Aid with CrossFit was, one, that there were other things that I couldn't yet do that I wanted to be able to do. And then 2 was really reading into the piece of wanting to be healthy. And like you said, I was never somebody who was super strong or athletic, but it was this kind of this new perspective on that I, especially as a woman, could be really strong.
Absolutely.
And be able to do things that I couldn't before. It's simple things like picking up boxes when you move. And so I really love the way that I was able to translate the strength that I got from CrossFit into the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Functionality, right?
Yeah, exactly. So cool. Even if it meant like I can go hiking now and I'm less winded sort of thing. So I think that's really what helped me really get into it.
Okay, cool.
To make it just part of my routine.
Yeah. Is there any, it could be male or female, but are there any like CrossFit athletes that, maybe when you stepped into CrossFit that you really admired or you still really admire?
I am not huge on elite CrossFit athletes.
Okay, like
personally.
the competition, the games and all that. Okay, yeah.
But at the same time, over the years, I think the people who I really admire the most and inspire me the most are the people who are really out of shape.
Okay.
And the fact that they come back and they try really hard, even if it means that they're not doing everything the way that everyone else is.
Right, yeah, for sure. Cool. And I think it's really cool too, like, some of the female athletes within CrossFit, and they get pregnant, they have their kids, and then they come back, and I'm like, dang, like it's just, and they're, with obviously with social media, Instagram, there's always the before and after pictures, but it's just really cool to see. I think it might be a little bit different from what you were speaking on, but for me, my perspective is like, the ladies that were like, CrossFit Games athletes, like 5 years, 6, 7 years, and they're getting like towards my age, they have a kid or a couple kids, and then they come back. They might not make it to the games, but just to be able to see that transformation, it's always powerful and encouraging for guys and girls both. So, okay, so let's start kind of moving into, Deidre, how you kind of got into nutrition, how you got passionate about it. Just talk about that journey, that story of how you really stepped into that nutrition aspect of things, and then we'll kind of get more into the nitty gritty. I've got some questions specifically about nutrition. I want to talk about the habit type stuff, mindset. But first of all, how did you get into nutrition? How did you get that interest and then kind of that passion for it?
So after I started doing CrossFit, I became a CrossFit instructor.
Okay.
And I loved working with CrossFit athletes, but one of the things that I really saw was there was this huge gap for CrossFit athletes in terms of their nutrition.
Okay.
They would be at the gym every day, killing themselves in the gym, but then eating donuts and drinking beer and like not thinking about what they were putting in their body at all.
Yeah.
And so that's what really kind of got me interested in taking that path. At the same time, continuing to coach CrossFit at that point in time.
Okay, cool. So now for you personally, like, I know you had mentioned a few minutes ago about just like, hey, like wanting to kind of start eating a little bit better, not having the ramen noodles, the college diet. So for you personally, what has that nutrition journey kind of look like? You know what I mean? Because like, now my story's a little bit different, but most people when they go to college, like it's the partying, it's the beer, maybe some weed, drugs, whatever, and they're just eating the cafeteria food or going to McDonald's, things like that. Yours was probably a little bit different, it sounds like, but generally speaking, that college diet is not very healthy at all. So what's your personal journey, Deidre, in regards to like nutrition? How has that evolved over time and over the years?
Yeah, so I definitely grew up eating the standard American diet.
Yeah.
I like to tell people that I started drinking soda when I was 2 years old.
Dang, that's pretty young.
Yeah. My parents, I love them so much, but when we were growing up, we did not drink water. We drank Pepsi.
Okay.
And health food was not something that lived in our house.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up eating a lot of processed foods.
Yep.
Like my favorite food was hot dogs. And when I got into high school, I had a lot of health issues in terms of having migraines.
Okay.
And I remember going to the doctor, and it didn't click at that point in time, but I went to the doctor and I was having these really bad migraines, and they of course gave me some migraine medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But they were asking me, well, what kind of things are you eating? And I told them, and they said, well, it's what you're eating, you know, which was good at that point.
Yeah, of course.
So I changed that a little bit, but I was still eating a ton of carbs, like
Right.
pizza, noodles. That was kind of my home base.
Mm-hmm.
Never really grew up eating a ton of vegetables unless it was corn or potatoes. And so once I started thinking about what I was eating, I tried to start. The first thing was, I know that I need to eat more vegetables, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so slowly working my way into that. And I've never particularly followed a specific diet per se. I've tried a lot of them, like
Of
most
course.
of us have.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done paleo, I've done zone, which is the big one with CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a little bit more fat heavy than a paleo diet, but just kind of finding that spot that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, I'm not terribly strict.
Right,
with anything.
Yeah. Was, when you're having those migraines and things like that, because I know a couple people personally that have struggled with migraines, and they were, they're both females as well, which I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but I know, like, my niece, she's had, I think it's probably at least a year and a half, 2 years of, like, horrible migraines, and finally they've kind of got to the point where it's like, they're looking at the nutrition and cutting out gluten. So I know the other person I'm thinking of that had the migraines, it came back to, like, the gluten. Once she took out the gluten for my niece and this other individual, that really helped with the migraine. So was that something that the doctor kind of suggested to you or not?
It wasn't at the time. I think for me at the time it was processed sodium.
Oh, okay.
Just being too high.
Mm-hmm.
Gluten is something that I have since taken out, and I definitely know affects me, but I don't think it was causing the migraines for me, at least.
Okay. So once you kind of cleaned up your diet or started eating a little bit more vegetables when you're younger, did that help with the migraines or not really?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, it did?
Yeah. Just getting a little bit more balanced approach to what I was eating, so it wasn't all carbs and all sodium.
Right, yeah.
Definitely helped.
And did you keep drinking the Pepsi, or did you cut that out too?
I cut that out too. So
oh, okay. That probably helped a lot right there. Yeah.
Not right away though.
Uh-huh.
I've started doing that early on in college, and it was more because soda's expensive when you're a college kid.
Right.
And so I started cutting out soda, and I remember at that point in time getting terrible headaches, and I was just getting caffeine withdrawals. And it's one of those things that now I'm really glad that I went through, because I can relate to clients who have those soda addictions, because it really is similar to having a drug addiction and going through withdrawals in terms of just feeling like junk.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of see, like, just this kind of where you're at today, just kind of you're sharing your story. So you talk about, just wanting to continue to learn and grow and things like that. Then you get into CrossFit, you start coaching, you kind of realize that you love teaching, you love coaching, you kind of have your own personal nutrition journey. So let's start talking about kind of like where you're at today. So again, like I said in the introduction, you're the owner of Always Growing Nutrition. So kind of like, when did you actually, and it sounds like maybe from the CrossFit coaching and probably being around that community, that environment, but when did you actually decide that, hey, like, I want to pursue, being a nutritionist and, coach, and really starting to educate people on what I know about nutrition?
So it was about 4.5 years ago, I decided to really start pursuing the path of focusing on nutrition, or making it a big part of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was still coaching at the same time. So up until very recently, I was still coaching and doing nutrition at the same time. And now I'm just focusing on nutrition.
Yeah. So what like, when you kind of decided to step into, like, nutrition full time, was it just kind of like, hey, you know what, like, this is what I'm passionate about, and I think that I could really make a living off of the nutrition coaching, as opposed to trying to, do the nutrition coaching and the CrossFit coaching? What was kind of like your mindset or mind frame in choosing to kind of go all in with the nutrition?
So I think for me, I love coaching CrossFit. I coached for over 6 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I love working with athletes around their body, but it always came back to what they were eating for me. And for me, I feel like I could make so much more of a difference in somebody's life if I was talking to them about what they were putting in their body as opposed to them spending 1 hour with me.
Right, yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's start talking about some of the details of kind of like your philosophy, what you believe, what you coach, what you teach in regards to nutrition. So I want to touch on, because you mentioned it with I believe it was the book Atomic Habits, the book that you gift often. Let's talk about, because I think it's on your Always Growing Nutrition Instagram. You have like habit-based nutritionist. So what is a habit-based nutritionist? What is the importance of having habits or talking to your clients about habits in regards to changing their nutrition, changing their health?
So when I started doing nutrition coaching with people, I would give them a plan. It would say, here's what I want your meals to look like.
Right.
Even if it wasn't, here's a meal plan for you, but here's what they should be structured like. Here's some foods to follow. And I would give them this plan and send them to the races.
Right, for sure.
And so many times I would follow up with those people and nothing was happening. And a lot of it for people is even if they know everything that they should be doing, they don't know how to put it into place on their own. And so I've changed my approach to, instead of it being program-based or results-based, being more habit-based.
Okay.
So now my perspective is that I like to work with people first for a longer period of time. So I only work with people for 3 months at a time minimum.
I like that. That's good.
So with that in mind, we only work on one thing at a time. So my goal, rather than give somebody a plan and see if how much of it sticks, I give them one thing to focus on each, and we do weekly check-ins.
Okay.
So if this week all we're talking about is your protein intake, that's all I want you to focus on. I don't care if you're having protein and French fries every day, as long as you are focusing on your protein. We're putting that habit in place so that you are at least thinking about it when you sit down to eat.
Right.
So then what I like to do is layer on as we go, so it gets more complex the longer we go. The goal is always at the end of the 3 months or 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, for them to be able to do everything on their own going forward. But so that we can make sure as much of it sticks as possible over time, as opposed to, just completely guessing and seeing what works for somebody, or them not having the tools, the resources to really make it stick and stopping when they need to. A lot of people, I find that some habits are harder than others.
For sure.
So it might take a little bit more time and working on it and finding the kinks and a little bit of trial and error there and making it work for them. So that's kind of why I take that approach of just focusing on one thing at a time, so we can really make sure that they have a firm grasp on it before they do it for a week and everything falls off the wagon after that.
Right. Is it really kind of come to, like this simplicity thing? Because I feel like even for myself, if I'm stepping into something new, and I don't really have a lot of, experience or like knowledge base on that, it can be really overwhelming. So it's like trying to navigate, social media and trying to figure out how to like monetize a podcast, all this stuff. Like there's so much information, and you're trying to do something new or step into something new. It can get really overwhelming. So is that what you've really found, Deidre, is like with your nutrition clients? Like if you just focus on one thing, there's a lot better possibility of them following through and accomplishing what they want to accomplish, as opposed to kind of giving them everything and just saying, run with it. Like you've probably found that can be really overwhelming, and then that's when they fall off the wagon and they don't finish what they wanted to start. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it comes to people who are athletes, they're already really motivated people and they want to make changes.
Yeah.
They have so much information overwhelming them all the time. It's, I need to eat enough protein, but maybe I should do keto. Should I do intermittent fasting? Well, how much water am I drinking? Do I need to take all of these supplements? And there's so much information out there that if you don't break it down and give it to somebody, even if they're the most motivated person in bite-sized pieces, so much of it they don't know how to implement, or they have full intentions on putting it in place, but they just don't. Right.
Okay, so let's talk about personalization a little bit, because I know for myself, and when it comes to nutrition, even you can talk to 100 people about what are like a couple things that they should be eating, and like probably all of them will say, well, I should be eating, or you should be eating, we should be eating to be more healthy fruits and vegetables, right? But I found for myself, like I I don't really have any fruits and vegetables. A lot of like, especially like the vegetables, it's because of the fiber. It messes up my stomach and all this stuff. So like, I know very personally that nutrition should be very personalized because every person's body is different. And just to throw out blanket statements like, oh, we should be eating 7 or 8 servings of, fruits and vegetables every day, should have this much protein. Okay, yeah, there's some guidelines that if you're starting from the college diet and then you kind of go over here, yeah, you're going to see some results, it'll be good. But like nutrition to me, more than even like fitness, should be very, very personalized. I feel like there should be blood testing done if you really want to take to the next level, and different tests for your gut health and all that. But the blanket statements, I don't like those blanket statements. So in regards to personalization, how do you approach that? What's kind of like your philosophy in kind of personalizing each nutrition plan for your specific clients?
So I kind of like to think about nutrition and health as a spectrum.
Okay.
And so if you're going from a spectrum of somebody being in disease where they are really unhealthy and they feel really crappy, to somebody who's perfectly healthy, they're doing everything right.
Right.
When I sit down and talk to somebody, I want to see where they are on that spectrum. It doesn't matter where they are, but the goal is to move the needle in the right direction for them.
For sure.
So even if that means, if I have somebody come in and they tell me I eat McDonald's three times a day, and that's what I eat every single day.
Drink Pepsi every day.
Right?
Right.
Then what changes can we make so that's just a little bit better? Even if it means that they're not going to stop going to McDonald's, how can we make that better for them?
Yes.
So that they're moving a little bit in the right direction. Maybe eventually that means they're going to sit down and do meal prep and they're going to like have these perfectly portioned meals. But if they never get there, it doesn't matter to me as long as we're going in the right direction. And that definitely plays into different eating ideologies. If you're vegan or vegetarian, great. How can we make that better for you?
Right.
If it's somebody, like you said, you don't eat a lot of vegetables, okay, how can we make this better for you so that you're still getting what you need? And really looking at what your body functions well with, as opposed to me just saying, well, everyone needs these 4 things at every meal, and this is exactly what it should look like. And if you can't follow this, you're not doing it right.
Right, yeah.
I feel like our nutrition and food is such a vital component of our identity.
It is, for sure.
That if you're not paying attention to it and you're saying you don't fit into this box, then that kind of leaves you out in limbo, like, well, then where do I belong with food? So I think having an open mind when it comes to working with people is really important, just because not everybody's going to fit into a box that I've deemed as correct for everybody.
Right, yeah. No, I appreciate that perspective. And I saw, when I was doing a little research on you, I saw something about personalization. I knew that was a topic that I wanted to touch on because, again, I just get frustrated. There's a lot of frustrating things in the health, fitness, nutrition world because I see all these people, with these blanket statements. It's like, no, like, okay, if that the people that get on like the keto and they're like, just zealots and all that, and I get it because some of these people were like, they had cancer and then they went on the keto diet and then they didn't have cancer, and obviously there's a lot of factors that tie into that, I think, outside of just like changing your diet, but changing your diet it's a very powerful thing. But again, it's like these people that get so zealous about, the zone diet, the keto diet, being a vegan, all that. It's like, okay, that's great. If that worked for you, share your information because we need that information. Share your story. That's very powerful. But don't just throw out these blanket statements like, oh, you should be a vegan because of this. Look at this documentary. It's like, let's just take a step back and figure out what works best for each individual. So I appreciate that perspective and I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about food fear. You mentioned like carbs earlier, and I know that's something in our culture, like the war on carbs, and carbs are bad, and when you're an athlete, like I know with the CrossFit thing, a lot of people have kind of gone into the paleo or the low carb, and they're trying to be like these games athletes, and that's messing up their adrenals and hormones and all that, which I want to get into that here in a minute. But let's talk about food fear, because you just mentioned about how big food is in our culture, right? Like if you're going to go out, let's say on a date, if you're going to go meet with a high school friend, if you're going to meet with somebody kind of out in the public, even when you invite them over their house, like you're probably going to go to a restaurant, you're going to go to the movies, you're going to have popcorn. Like food is everywhere, it's right in front of us. But I think there's a lot of food fear because of some of the information that's being put out there. So do you have a lot of clients, and maybe not so much if you're working with athletes, but maybe so, because again, the carb thing, especially with the CrossFit. But do you have a lot of clients that come and, like, let's say they're afraid to eat too much fat, they're afraid to eat too many carbs because of whatever they've kind of ingested in regards to information? So just touch on that, share about maybe your personal experience if you have any, and then the experience with your clients.
So there's definitely a lot of fear when it comes to food that people come to me with. My favorite thing is when somebody sits down with me and they say, I eat pretty well, I don't eat a lot of carbs, I don't eat a lot of fat, and I stay away from salt.
There you go. What are you eating then, right?
So and it definitely depends what camp you fall into. I think we're kind of, like you said, we're learning so much about health and nutrition all the time.
Right.
And there's always new information out there. So it's not anyone's fault that they don't know exactly what's going on and what's current.
For sure.
A lot of it is, carbs are bad because carbs cause heart disease.
Right.
Fat causes heart disease. And a lot of that information is so outdated, but it's so prevalent in our culture. And it's been so ingrained in our brains that it's more of my job is just undoing that learning for a lot of people and teaching them why those things are necessary in their diet. And for me, it's definitely, like everyone else, was just like a lot of unlearning and then trying it and seeing if it worked for me. And if it does, then okay, that can stay there. But if it doesn't work for somebody, then by all means, we can go backwards. Right.
What's like the biggest food fear in regards to like the macronutrients? Is it, I'm going to assume most people aren't probably afraid of eating too much protein, but do a lot of people come in with the fear of like eating too many carbs or having too much fat? Do you see that a lot or not per se?
Yeah. So I would say when somebody is trying to get lean, they're definitely afraid of eating too many carbs.
Right.
And I definitely see this more with women than I do men. A lot of women don't realize how important carbs are, especially for their hormone health, which I know we'll talk about.
Yes.
But they don't realize how much they need that, and so they're not eating any of that, or they're eating too much of it and they don't realize it.
Right.
That definitely happens with athletes when they're looking to get really lean. But in general, I would say more people are afraid of fat. A lot of people, when I sit down and have them talk about what they eat in a day, never mention fat.
For sure.
And then when I ask them, okay, what are you cooking with? Very little butter, very little olive oil. And they're very specific about, I don't use too much of it. And it's kind of like a badge of honor for them that they aren't using very much of it. So I think those are definitely the big two.
Yeah.
I'm definitely seeing fat a little bit more recently, I think, since paleo 6 years ago was really popular.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's definitely a little less popular now. I think everybody went through the phase where they did paleo and they went really low carb and realized how crappy they felt, and now they eat carbs again.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of getting back into that phase where when I'm telling somebody how much fat they really need to have in their diet, they're always so surprised. It's way more than they are eating, and they're surprised at how different they feel when they do it.
For sure. Now, fat is, correct me if I'm wrong, but fat is very essential for brain health. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Can you just touch on that just maybe a little bit?
Yeah, so I want to say it's 80% of your brain is made out of fat.
Right.
It's very, very important for your brain synapses to work properly. So you can't make connections mentally without fat. It's so important for reducing brain fog, for clarity, for mental focus, everything like that.
For sure. Cool. Okay, so let's transition into kind of the hormone talk, because that's something else that you had on your Instagram bio. So I don't really have a whole lot to say, but I just want you to kind of touch on the importance of nutrition, how nutrition, the food that we're taking in, how that's linked to hormones, specifically, with females and things like that. Because I know, people that like undereat, females I'm referring to, like females that undereat, they're over exercising, they don't have their period for a long period of time, no pun intended there, and that can just cause, all kinds of issues in regards to pregnancy and all kinds of other stuff. So let's just focus on, females, on women, and the nutrition tie or link to hormones, undereating, over-exercising, kind of all that. I'll just let you kind of run with that, Deidre, okay?
Yeah. So for women, it's really important to make sure you're eating the right things, because if you don't have enough things in your diet, you're not going to be able to produce hormones properly. So I work with a lot of women around balancing their hormones. And it definitely relates back to insulin, which is another hormone, and that affects everybody.
For sure.
So insulin is your hormone that regulates your blood sugar. When you eat carbs, you release insulin, helps bring down your blood glucose levels, keeps that in check. And a lot of times that will affect your female hormones. So one of the big reasons that fat is so important in our diet is getting cholesterol, which is one of the things that people are very nervous about. And very nervous about eating things like eggs because they have cholesterol.
Right.
But cholesterol is what our sex hormones are derived from.
For sure.
So without enough cholesterol in your diet, your body will certainly produce some, but you need to have some in your diet so that you can produce those hormones more readily. So when women are going through things like their periods are out of whack, if they're coming off birth control or going on birth control, if they are having fertility issues, if they are going through menopause, everything like that all comes back to making sure that you have enough fatty acids in your diet so that your body can produce those hormones properly. A lot of women don't realize that, and women are definitely more susceptible, I would say, to keeping fat out of their diet.
For sure.
In general. They're very nervous that fat becomes fat in the body, which it doesn't. And not in terms of how we think of body fat.
Right.
So that's definitely very important, but carbs are also important. A lot of women who undereat carbs, or if they go very strict paleo, like you said, they will lose their period. And the thing that I always think is interesting is when women come to me, and I always ask women, tell me about your cycle, is it normal, anything like that, anything of concern there. When women don't have a regular period, they are so happy about it. And the thing that a lot of women don't realize is that your period is kind of a health marker to tell you where things are at with your body.
For sure.
And not having it is a huge red flag that something's going wrong.
Wow, okay.
If you aren't producing the sex hormones properly, there's a whole cascade of issues that happen there in terms of like hair loss, what does your skin look like, things that women are concerned about. But a lot of times we have deemed having a cycle this negative thing, and it's this thing that we all dread going through. Right. But it's such an important piece of our hormone cycle that's just different than men. Men's hormone cycle is a 24-hour cycle, regenerates every day. Women's is a longer month-long cycle, obviously. So making sure you're eating the right things to make sure that your hormones are where they should be is super important. Yeah.
Now, touch on just for a couple minutes, like the over-exercising thing, because that seems to be another catalyst, right, for the period loss, for a lot of other issues we have, and you know, I think it's more common with females, but you know, I've struggled with it. I know there's a lot of guys out there, but you know, you being a female and things like that, you know, the under eating. And then the over-exercising. So just touch on like the over-exercising. Like, you know, some listeners might be like, well, you know, they probably understand like over-exercising, like you're exercising too much. But where do you cross that line? Because, right, our culture's like, you've got to eat, you know, for your fruits and vegetables. You've got to eat this, avoid these foods. And then you should be exercising like at least 60 minutes a day. But then, you know, at some point the line is crossed where you start cutting out food, you start working out too much. So just touch on over-exercising, kind of what is it, what does it look like, what are some of those red flags with clients when they come in and you're like, okay, they're exercising too much.
So when it comes to exercising, there's definitely a line to be crossed. And I think some of the things you have to look out for when you're over-exercising is if you're not recovering properly, if you find yourself always tired, you're just constantly fatigued. If you start craving foods that you don't normally crave, it's usually sweets and salty things. Those are some of the big red flags. It can be not being able to sleep properly. It's another big thing I always ask people, how is your sleep? If you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night, that's usually a good sign that something is going wrong exercise-wise. Because what happens when we exercise too much is it puts our adrenals out of whack. And a lot of people have heard this term, adrenal fatigue. It's closely related to your blood sugar. So when your blood sugar crashes too low, your adrenals release cortisol, which is our stress hormone, tells us to bring our blood sugar back up, basically pulls it from our muscles and our liver. When this happens at night, it wakes you up in the middle of the night. So if you're somebody who wakes up in the middle of the night constantly, it is likely not that you're waking up because you need to pee. It's because your body is releasing adrenaline because your brain thinks you're dying because your blood sugar is going too low.
That's me.
Yeah.
I wake up quite a bit in the night. So
that's one of those things. It's usually like 3 or 4 a.m. pretty religiously. So that happening over and over again, especially when you are under eating and you're exercising a lot, is kind of this bad combination, because what happens is if your blood sugar crashes too low, you can basically go into a hypoglycemic episode. It means that you're not getting enough of the right things to fuel your body, especially for the type of activity that you're doing. So this is really popular with CrossFitters, of course.
Yeah.
They're focused on their diet. They're eating as little carbs as possible, lots of veggies. They're trying to get lean, so they're trying to work out 3 hours a day. And what happens is eventually their body just crashes. So it's exercise puts stress on our body in a good way, but when we kind of cross that boundary where we're not recovering or we start seeing injuries and our body isn't able to fix things properly, can become really problematic, especially for women. It definitely happens for both sexes, but especially for women, because they'll start to lose their period, and that's a very clear sign that something is definitely out of whack. Usually it's a matter of under eating for women. You can usually, if you eat more, still be able to maintain the level of physical activity that you're doing as an athlete and have your period come back, but when it goes away, there's something definitely wrong there.
Do you going back to the period talk, because in our culture it's interesting, like like sex is something that people don't want to talk about, right? Probably, period talk is something people don't want to talk about. There's like certain like things in our culture. It's getting a little bit better, especially when you live in a place like Denver. It's there's a lot more openness to all that. But do you find it hard, like when you have like a female client, it's like maybe your first meeting or second meeting, and you start, when you ask them about their cycle, right, and about the period stuff, like do you find a lot of them that is it hard for them to like open up and talk about that? And then do you have to kind of like maybe use some of your coaching tools or whatever to kind of like really open them up so that they can, so you guys together can kind of get where you want to go in regards to like the nutrition talk?
Right. I think it definitely depends on the person. It's definitely becoming more common that they are open to talking to me about that. More and more I find that women will come to me because they are doing things like getting off birth control, or they're trying to get pregnant, or they just know that something's out of whack and they don't know exactly what's going on, and so they're open to talking about those things. But when I talk to people about their nutrition and they come and do a consultation with me, not knowing exactly what they're walking into, especially women, I ask them, how is your cycle? Are you trying to get pregnant? Tell me about your sleep. Tell me about your stress levels. Things that aren't specifically nutrition related, but we can help those things based on the food that you're putting in your body. So a lot of them are getting way more open to that.
That's good.
But definitely when I started, it was really hard to get people to talk to you about that. It's like, why do you need to know this? These parts of my personal life.
Of course.
But I think more and more, I think people are getting educated on how deep nutrition really can go to change those pieces of your life, just based on what you're putting in your body. It can be something as simple as like losing your period. If you're losing your period, if I tell you to eat X, Y, and Z in these quantities and it comes back, clearly something is related there.
Of course.
I think more and more people are realizing how smart their bodies are and how interconnected everything is.
Was it hard for you to talk about that type of stuff when you first started getting into nutrition? Was that kind of like a fear or an anxiety that you kind of had to break through, like talking about periods and more of that personal stuff? Because just like, obviously we've never met before this podcast conversation, but you seem like you're probably a little bit more reserved, a little bit more of a quiet individual. So, and you're kind of just like your story, being kind of more in the arts and more studious and things like that. Is that fair to say you are kind of a little bit more like introverted, quiet, or not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then I think that would probably be hard when you start talking about the period, when you start talking about the sex hormones and different things. So just touch on that, how you personally had to overcome some of those fears and anxieties to be a little bit more outgoing if you're going to work with people and ask them about some difficult things to talk about.
So I think when I started, it was definitely a lot harder, and I think I found that like I've always really struggled with public speaking, but when I talk to somebody one-on-one, it's a lot easier have a more intimate conversation. When I started nutrition, I felt like I am here to strictly talk to you about what you're eating, and nothing else is like, that's not my job, sort of thing. And I think as my career's progressed, I've kind of realized that my role in a lot of people's lives is really not their therapist per se, but I'm really diving into a lot of other things going on.
Right.
Them feeling guilty about things, or a lot of it, when I talk to women who have fertility issues and they're trying to resolve those issues so that they can get pregnant, it's like there's a lot of shame there's a lot of fear there, and it's talking to people through those things so that they can get where they want to be, even though like that is not, I'm just their nutritionist.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So it definitely took some time for me to really get comfortable with it. And I think a lot of what has really helped me is just, of course, practice and repetition with that, but seeing a lot of the similar things over and over and being able to read what they're already feeling.
Right,
so if somebody, in the example of they're trying to get pregnant and they don't really know what's going on and they definitely don't want to be accepting that something fertility-wise might be going on, or it's something that they have control over or can at least have some input on, being able to kind of know what that pain point is for them of, I think you probably are feeling like this right now. And having that relation point has really been helpful.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're taking like a holistic approach, right? And I believe like any type of coaching in any aspect of life, whether that's business coaching, whether that's nutrition, fitness, you know, even like teaching in a school, the holistic approach is the right approach, because it's always like, you know, I had a chiropractor, I've had several on, but one of them I'm thinking of specifically, Dr. Jesse, like, you know, his whole thing is like this holistic approach to chiropractic care, because a lot of my experience was like you walk in, you pay either before or after, but the whole thing is they crack you, they pop you, and you walk out. His whole thing is like it's like an experience, right? And before he starts, you know, doing anything with the body, he's talking about how's their day been, how's their week, and I think that's the right approach in any type of coaching, teaching, is that holistic approach, because there's always more that's going on than kind of that surface level stuff, right? Like when you start talking about, oh, I haven't had my period for 2 months. Okay, well, that's a huge red flag for something else. Somebody comes in, oh, my back hurts. Well, it's probably not even their back that hurts. Like it could be some stress from earlier in the day. So again, I appreciate, you know, that perspective that you're taking with nutrition, because I believe it's the right perspective. So let's touch on consistency, because consistency, in my estimation, is king. Consistency counts. Everything in life, you don't have to be perfect at anything. Perfection, in my estimation, is that's not even a reality. But a lot of us, you know, kind of type A people, athletes, very driven, very focused, like trying to be perfect, all this stuff. But, you know, when you're just working with people in regards to nutrition, again, you know, going back to kind of one thing at a time, very simple, is consistency something that you really try to harp on or encourage your clients in? Because it's like, hey, you're not going to eat perfect. You don't have to eat perfect. But if you're just consistent, that's going to get you a long way. Is that something that you really try to concentrate on?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that everything compounds one way or the other. So even if you are making a 1% difference in the positive direction in terms of making a change, that compounds to something like 37% over the course of the year. But in that same year, if you were to go 1% in the decline, you'll end up near zero.
Right.
So even though making small changes doesn't feel really big at the time, or it doesn't feel like it's going to have this huge impact on your life, something as simple as, you know, just making sure that you're drinking enough water sounds so simple. Like if a nutritionist said, like, you know, you need to drink more water, or one of the other ones that I tell a lot of people is to slow down when they eat. Yeah. It sounds so simple, and they're like, why are you telling me this? Like, tell me how much to eat, what to eat, all that good stuff. I need a meal plan. And it's like, no, you just need to slow down. And even if you were to just do that, that can change the way that your body functions, the way that you digest food, the way you break it down, and you're actually able to use it. And that can make such a bigger difference than if I were to tell you how to do everything perfectly, but you weren't doing that one piece of it. So a lot of it just compounds, and consistency is very important for creating long-term change, as opposed to just making a change that's going to give you a quick result.
Cool. Now, I want to touch on, we've been going for almost an hour, so we're going to start heading towards the end here. There's a few more things I want to touch on. Deidre, what's one of the biggest, and if there's more than one you want to touch on, that's more than cool with me, but what's like one of the biggest nutrition myths out there? something that, you know, you can, I'm cholesterol, the salt, like it's all bad, but what's one that you, maybe personally, like a myth that, you know, you kind of bought into, and then once you kind of started studying nutrition more, learning more, you're like, oh wow, this is actually a myth. And then maybe what's one that continually comes up with your clients that you kind of have to bust or like clarify?
So two big ones come to mind. The first one is that nutrition is complicated. I think that nutrition really should be very simple. Yes. It should be easy to understand. and that it's something that everybody can do. And I think it's something that everybody deserves to have access to.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of people feel like they are boxed out of having to worry about their nutrition, or it's something that's going to be way too hard for them to do or make changes to, and so they just never do it.
Right.
And I think when people come to me and they ask me, like, how do I know when something's like a fad diet or if it's something that's like truly helpful for me? My question that I tell them to ask about whatever that is it complicated? If it's really complicated, then chances are it's probably a fad. It's something that's going to go away soon. You don't need to, dive too far into it. But a lot of times those things do help make changes.
For sure.
So I encourage people to always look for simple solutions to their issues rather than making this big grand plan and having to feel like they have to be perfect.
Of course, yeah.
The other one is that people think that they have to be perfect when it comes to their food, and they don't have to be perfect, they just need to do better.
Right.
A lot of people, they want the meal plan, they want to measure and weigh and do all of those things, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
It really can just be making things better. So even if, I like to use the example of spaghetti. Everyone had spaghetti when they were a kid. If you love spaghetti and you make one little change, your spaghetti's getting better. If it's, I'm going to look at my tomato sauce, is it sugar-free or not? If you make that change, it's better.
I like that,
If you are looking at the pasta and you decide you're going to do a gluten-free pasta instead of a whole grain pasta, great, that's better. It doesn't have to be totally perfect, it doesn't have to be perfectly portioned, or all the ingredients have to be quality, or whatever it is. Just if you're moving in that right direction, that's improving your health.
Right.
As opposed to, beating yourself up because it wasn't perfect. And I think that's where people get really, they kind of get sidelined because they feel like if they're not doing it perfectly, then it doesn't matter at all. And if you're making those little changes over time, some of them are going to stick, and some of them are just going to be your new routine.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Awesome. Let's talk about kind of like functionality, being functional, because that's something that you wanted me to kind of put in there in regards to me introducing you. So, like, in regards to nutrition, how does functionality, or what is being functional in regards to nutrition? What does that mean? Kind of what does that look like?
So I like to work with a lot of athletes,
right.
And part of that relates to how they're using food to fuel their bodies. So a lot of things I work on with athletes are doing nutrient timing around their training, or making sure they're getting the right things at the right time to fuel their goals. So if it's somebody who's looking to lose body fat, then making sure you're getting the right things at the right times during the days in order to help promote that. Or if you're looking to build muscle, then you need to eat things at the right times. So that's a piece of it in terms of making your nutrition functional for you. But the other piece is making it fit your lifestyle. So whether you are somebody who likes to go hiking, and that's kind of your end goal, if your nutrition isn't playing towards that, or you have no idea what to do when that situation comes, it doesn't matter what you're doing during the week. So many people, Monday through Thursday, they're spot on with the nutrition, and then Friday through Sunday, everything goes out the window.
Yep.
So finding a balance for people so that they still have the tools to fit their lifestyle and make their lifestyle work for them, and have nutrition that really, really fits for them, is really important to me. And that might mean, having some flexibility, or teaching people that, even if they are looking at it from, an 80-20 consistency standpoint, they're still making progress in the right direction, and giving them that perspective to make it work for them so that they don't feel like at the end of the week they failed. Right.
So basically, like the functionality of nutrition from your perspective, how you incorporate it, is just working it in so that they can still live like the life that they want to live. It's not restricting or holding them back. Is that fair?
Right, absolutely. And even we're coming into the holiday season right now.
Yeah.
A lot of people right now are very nervous about getting into nutrition around the holidays.
Yeah.
And I always like to encourage them to do nutrition through the holidays, because when have they ever focused on what they're eating for the holidays? And if you never do it during that time, you might never be able to have those tools in order to survive the holidays in a way where you actually feel good, instead of doing these 2 months of like, I eat everything I want and then I feel like crap come January and then I have to reset. That's 2 months of the year that you're losing every year, essentially. Yeah. So if you had the tools to work through that, you would then have them for the rest of your life. So
I'm this is something I wasn't even thinking about asking, but now that you brought it up, we are coming on, we're in November, December, there's going to be a lot of good food in front of us. So this is I'm really thankful that you brought this up. So what would you suggest? Somebody's listening to this. They're resonating with some of the information you're sharing, Deidre. What would you? Because again, it's like I've lived a life in the past, like because I've competed in bodybuilding. I've always been from a very young age, like I'd say worried about what I'm eating, how I look, and stuff like that. So I've been very restrictive in my life. And the holiday season, it's like we'd go to like family functions and all the good food, like I wouldn't eat any of it. I would stick to my eating regimen, right? And then that causes all kinds of anxiety inside of me. And then, when you're younger, because people say comments, it just creates this angst and just a lot of stuff internally. So in order to avoid that and to actually enjoy life, enjoy the holiday season, but yet kind of stay on track nutritionally and health-wise, what are maybe a couple key things that people that are listening to this can kind of take away and apply during the next couple months so they don't completely, like you said earlier, fall off the wagon?
So there's two big things, and I always encourage people to choose the easier one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is if you're traveling, it's the holidays, whatever it is, just make sure you're getting protein at every meal.
Okay.
A lot of the meals that you have, especially around the holidays, it's like Christmas morning and you just want to have waffles or whatever it is.
Yeah, that sounds good. Peanut butter?
Yeah.
Can I have some peanut butter?
Have some sort of protein, only because it's going to make sure that, especially when you are an athlete, you're not breaking down muscle mass over the holidays. But two, it's going to help keep you full. So when you stay full, you're much more likely to make good decisions farther on in the day, as opposed to if you're hungry. When we're hungry, we just put anything in our mouth we can find.
Right.
So protein is the big one. Every meal, if you can get protein, you're at least set up for success there.
Cool.
The other one is if you are traveling, and I know a lot of people when they travel for the holidays, they go home with their family and their families don't eat the way that they do. Start your day, ideally breakfast, but it really can be any meal, with one meal how you would normally have it. So I like to do breakfast. I feel like in general, if you start your day with a success, then it will transfer through at least a little bit more of your meals. So if it's having breakfast the way you normally would, whether that's perfectly portioned or just stick to your morning routine in terms of having a little bit of normalcy, then the rest of the day can be completely off of what you would normally do, but you at least started it that way, and so at least one meal of your day then is consistent.
Cool. That's great tactical advice. I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to touch on just like before I ask you the last question, I want to touch on kind of the business aspect of things, because you mentioned earlier you were doing the CrossFit coaching, you're doing the nutrition, kind of doing two things at once, and then here recently you've kind of gone all in with the nutrition. So what's one thing that as you've kind of gone all in with the nutrition and saying, hey, this is what I'm passionate about, this is my jam, this is what I'm going to do from here on out, what's one thing that you've kind of realized about business that until you kind of went all in, you didn't really realize like that was something that was going to be important, or some experience since you've gone all in that's helped you grow?
So I would say it really is just that, is going all in. So for a long time I juggled back and forth between coaching and being a nutritionist, and a lot of my clients are CrossFit athletes. They're a lot of my former athletes that I've trained. And I think for a long time I was very hesitant about going all into nutrition because there is a lot more room for failure there than there is when you're a CrossFit coach. You show up, you have your hour, you get paid for your hour. As a nutritionist, it's really the full business experience. It's getting clients, it's working with the clients, it's delivering the product, and then doing the follow-up. There's so much more to it. And I think for the longest time, the reason that I finally came into it was I was terrified that I was going to fail and not be able to do it full time. But what I have realized since then is when you go all into something, you're able to better put your energy towards that one thing. Yeah. And part of why I started moving away from coaching CrossFit, even though I love doing it and I love working with those athletes, was because I knew that the time that I was spending with them in that hour could be better served elsewhere.
I like that, yeah.
So just really knowing like what your time is worth and what you want to do with your time. And for me, it just came down to how can I best serve people? And I knew that as much as I love being with them in that hour and they love having me as a coach, that wasn't doing the most good.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Business coaching, have you had like a business mentor, a business coach that has kind of helped guided you in regards to kind of going all in?
Yeah, so I definitely have a couple. One of them is a woman that I met. Her name's Kat Haggerty. She's a CrossFit Advantage as well.
Cool.
She has definitely helped me in terms of thinking about marketing, and she's one of those people who, when I sit down and talk to her, we walk away with like 10 new ideas of things to work on.
Yeah.
But another one has been a client of mine who is a business coach, and he works in a completely different industry. He's always done mechanics and off-roading and more vehicle work.
Yeah.
But I think the people who have helped me the most in terms of having a business coach or a mentor has really come from people who are just business-minded and kind of always looking at what the next step is and kind of having a plan going forward, as opposed to, once I have a client, focusing completely on the client and giving them everything they need, but also looking at what the next step is. How can I reach more people so that not only am I able to reach more people, make what I know more easily accessible for them, but also make it more profitable for me so that everybody's getting what they need out of the transaction.
For sure. Okay, last thing I want to touch on here before I ask you the last question. Social media. How important is having a strong influence on social media, specifically like Instagram? How has that helped leverage your business since you've gone all in?
So I have definitely focused on social media, and it was something that I wasn't very good at probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons that I really got involved with a business coach to help me just work on branding and being consistent.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the big things that I focused on this year is consistency with social media. There are always connections with people that through social media that I would have never come across somebody in real life.
Of course, yeah.
So I've done events with people based on meeting them on social media, different podcasts, even clients who, even when somebody just has questions about something, if I can provide valuable information to them that actually helps them make changes in their life, even if they never become a client, I've helped them.
Absolutely.
And that's super important to me. But for a lot of those people, they do want to do something together in the future. But it's all about building that trust and that rapport. So it's definitely something that I focus on a lot.
What's what is the consistency of because this is something I love social media. I love Instagram, and I'm learning a lot. But what's is it kind of like one of the keys for you? Is it kind of like the regular posts? Is it more focusing on like Instagram stories? What have you kind of found to be the biggest value add in regards to kind of like having that presence on, like, let's say Instagram specifically?
So for Instagram specifically, I think I've been focusing more on the consistency of posts and providing information that basically gives people kind of this nice tightly knit package of information that they can use for one thing. And then also making sure that the information is really geared towards who I'm trying to reach. So with hormones, if I'm talking to women in particular, I want there to be a good amount of content on that specific topic that they can use. Or if it's, whatever topic it is. So they have all the information right there. They can save it for later. If they forget about it, you can go back to it, ask questions, and even if it's something that's not relevant now, might be relevant in the future.
Yeah, cool. All right, last question. What sets your soul on fire?
So I think what sets my soul on fire is I like educating people about what's going on with their body. I think so many people don't understand the way their body works, and I think when it comes down to it, our body is the only thing that we really have.
Right.
That is solely ours. And I am always fascinated when somebody comes to me and they don't understand the way that our bodies use food or the things we break it down, or they think it's some process that they're involved in any way, shape, or form. It just is the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so I like giving people the education so that they really can be in control of their bodies and make changes in their life. And teaching them how to do that. So a lot of it is just education for me.
Yeah. Okay, I got one more question. Is there anything that, because we've had a very thorough conversation, but is there anything that I haven't asked you, or anything that's just kind of like really, maybe that you want to kind of put out there to the world? Anything that I haven't asked you, anything that you want to kind of leave with the listeners in closing?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing is just to be curious about what's going on.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when it comes to symptoms that people have in their life, whether it is things like I have acid reflux, or my stomach hurts after I eat something, or I have these headaches, To not accept that as the end all be all and just stay curious about it, because a lot of times there's a solution or an answer to those issues that if you just write them off as normal, you're never really going to get down to the root of what's going on. And then also with that in mind, to not think about treating a symptom, but to really get to the root cause of something. So
Perfect.
Don't be afraid to dive in.
Cool. Be curious. We're gonna end it with that. So Deidre, if somebody's kind of resonated with your story, if they resonated with some of the information you've shared today, if they want to find out more about kind of your services, your coaching, and all that, where can people find out more about you and your nutrition services?
So my website is always-growing.com.
Okay.
And then I am on Instagram as alwaysgrowing_nutrition. And I'm on Facebook as well.
Okay, cool. So Deidre, I just want to thank you very much for sharing your story, sharing some awesome information in regards to nutrition. And so listeners, I just want to thank you again for hanging out with Deidre and myself today on the 127 Fit podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the guests that I'm bringing on to the podcast, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about myself personally, you can find me on Instagram, and that is at 127fit. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. LinkedIn is Quentin Vars. And if you guys would do me a huge favor, and please leave a 5-star rating and review, and also subscribe to the podcast, that would be greatly appreciated. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance that you think would be a great guest or guests for the 127 Fit podcast, you can send me an email or give this email out. The email is 127fit@gmail.com. Also, if you would like to be a sponsor of the 127 Fit podcast, you can send me an email, connect with me. I would love to sit down and chat. Just always looking to partner and connect with people that share a common vision that I have for the podcast, and that is positively impacting people. Also, if you would be interested in financially supporting the 127 Fit podcast, you can go to my Instagram bio and click on the link tree there. The first thing you're going to see is how you can support that through the Patreon program. That would be cool. Just looking for people to support the podcast so we can continue to move forward. And as you're finding great value in an episode or episodes of the 127 Fit podcast, if you would share that episode or episodes on your Facebook and Instagram stories using the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow, that will be cool. And per the usual, I will leave you guys with Proverbs 24:10, which states, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." This time, until next time, I will catch you guys later.